Hello my friends and welcome, my name is Dennis and this is the latest update from Ukraine. Ukraine takes more ground in the Kursk Oblast, and apparently the strategic move of the Ukrainian army is to attack the Kursk Oblast from the other side, from the western one. We're speaking about this area where Ukraine entered the Russian Federation recently, like 4 days ago. So today the armed forces of Ukraine launched a strike on Totkina. It's kind of the big village on the southern part of the Kursk Oblast. By doing so, Ukraine expanded the area. Also, we know that Russia started to withdraw their forces from Totkina because all of this part is out of the reliable supplies from the Russian side. So I would say that crossing this same river, yes, it's the name of the river, is imminent or inevitable for Ukrainian army. Russians are just unable to create enough forces to repel the strike. As I say to you, they're just being cut. They've not been cut just in Totkina. This entire area, as we know already, stays without the proper supplies. Russians in their media even say that they use drones to deliver food and water for their soldiers across the Seine River, and the situation for them will just deteriorate with every day. For this reason, Ukraine is not in a hurry to advance towards this side. Ukraine is concentrated mostly on the surveillance missions to cut all of the Russian pontoon bridges across the river. To eliminate all of the possible supplies, this strategy is good and effective because Russians, after all, will be forced to leave this area. For now, Russians have some of the resources, so if Ukraine starts the massive attack right now, it will suffer losses. So what Ukraine does right now are the small little bites from two of the areas, from two of the directions. Mostly Ukraine uses artillery, FPV drones and aviation, so the Air Force. And under this pressure, Ukraine will move forward little by little. Ukraine shouldn't be hurried with these tactics, because now Russia is forced to supply their group with any sort of the means like small boats or drones, as I say to you. So Ukraine might eliminate the pontoon bridges and also strike the FPV drone positions or surveillance drones positions of the Russian side. It is much better than Russia would just withdraw all of their forces right now. If Russia stays there for a very long time, they will have more losses, but it seems like the Russian generals do not understand that stuff. Alright, what's about Kornevo? Ukrainian army recently was quite successful in encircling attempts of this settlement. So with all of those attack vectors, Ukraine is aimed towards encirclement of the Kornevo. The situation for the Russian army is really difficult, but still they have the supply line. Just 1 day ago, Ukraine took Lubanovka village and took the eastern side of Kornevo under control. We know that Ukraine also crossed to the northern side from Olgivka, and according to the latest information, Russians retreated from 3 of those villages. It means that Ukraine will advance also from the northern part, so 100% Kornevo will fall into Ukrainian control. And the Russian forces will retreat from the settlement using the same road towards Rylovsk. My friends, a very short break. If you want to support the job that I do on YouTube, you may join my Patreon. My Patreon page is available in the video description just below. Thank you so much for your motivation. Alright, so we have the latest military map update from the Deep State military maps. Usually they send the information with delay, so it was yesterday and is today. Still, Ukraine moves a little bit from Sudzha, for example, but I know that this movement was done a long time ago. At least 2 days. Ukraine took those Dachi under control. But really the actual picture is like that. Ukraine absolutely took all of this area, also crossed the river, and now Ukraine is over here, ready to attack Kornevo also from the northeast. But what Russians are doing in the Kursk Oblast, in the area that was cut by Ukraine, I mean with collapse of those bridges? Well, they're looting their cities, towns and villages. Here you can see the Whiteberry's shop, it's the storage. So Russians enter the facility and they take everything from the shelves. And here we see the shops in Glushkovo town, so here everything was taken from the shelves too. Cracked glass, empty shelves, empty shops, everything is looted in the city. And the Ukrainian army is really far away from the place. Glushkovo is over here, still under the Russian control. It seems like the Russian soldiers have already decided to leave the area, taking everything with them. Locals, so Russians, reported that Ukrainian sabotage groups are wearing the Russian uniform and then go and loot everything around. But the problem is that the looting happening under the Russian strict control territory in the big settlements too. And on this picture you see who is doing it, the Russian army itself. This is the most precious trophy for them, the washing machine. So obviously Russians somehow will go out from the trap, but they will take everything from civilians. The Ukrainian soldiers in Lebedivka village rose the Ukrainian flag. Well, as you see, Lebedivka is far away from the actual front lines. Recently, the fights were ongoing for Malaya Lokhnya, which was taken by Ukrainian army. It seems like Russia still focused on idea to perform some sort of the provocation in Energodar, Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Well, at least there is one more wave of the pro-Russian or Z bloggers who say that the main aim for Ukraine is not the Kursk Oblast. Ukraine will strike Energodar, the place with nuclear power plant, and later on Ukraine will start the massive attack on Crimea, damaging the ammunition storages, military airfields, and cutting the Kerch Bridge connection. Here's what they say: the Ukrainian armed forces have been accumulating forces and means of the second day of the preparing of the provocation in direction of Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, Tokmak, Crimea, Kherson. Russians report about the use of the reconnaissance forces, and they monitored the movement of the Ukrainian forces in the region. Kind of the strange logic from the Russian army. So Ukraine tried to attack Tokmak the last year. We may say now that that offensive operation failed, and now Ukraine dispersed the forces also towards Kursk, and also Ukraine needs the resources to stop the Russian offensive on the east, but somehow, miraculously, Ukraine has extra forces to advance towards Tokmak and Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. If you check out the map, Tokmak is probably the most defended settlement out there. So Ukraine needs absolutely enormous amount of the forces to reach Tokmak. It didn't work the last year, and it will not work this year for sure, because Russia built significant defense lines, which many of the experts underestimate, including myself. Yeah, definitely the Russian defense worked quite well for them. But you know what? The Russian General Popov, who was the commander of the Russian defense the last year, he was arrested in Russia. Because of him, Ukraine wasn't able to penetrate the Russian defense and reach Tokmak. He's definitely one of the most talented Russian commanders. They have just few of those. As well as, by the way, the General Surovikin. Whether we like him or not, but compared to the other Russian generals, this one is also talented. It was his idea to build significant defense lines on the south and also in Belgorod, Kursk and Bryansk Oblast. Those defense lines on the Russian territory, however, didn't work well, but the General Surovikin at some time supported Prigozhin. That's why the Russian Defense Ministry decided to send him to Africa. So now he is not commanding the Russian group in Ukraine. So if Russia hadn't had this guy or this one, their defense would fail the last year. But this guy is now arrested and imprisoned because he was against the General Gerasimov at some time. And Surovikin, as I told you, was sent abroad. So the Russian military system eats the competent generals. They don't need those. They're afraid of the people who tell truth. Because General Popov many times said about poor supplies, poor training of the Russian soldiers, and that the high Russian military command misunderstands the reality of the situation. So if you tell that stuff in the Russian army, the system itself will eat you. The system needs loyal personnel, no rebels, especially after attempted Prigozhin's coup. So in a way, by dismissing the competent generals, Russians weaken their own defense, also on the south or elsewhere. We see what is happening in Kursk. What about the nuclear power plant in Energodar? Well, it's just across the river from the Ukrainian-controlled territory, and we know that Ukraine already tried to get the station under control back in autumn of 2022, but the landing operation unfortunately failed. Still, it is the long distance to cross. In the most narrow area, it's almost 5 kilometers, so 3.3 miles, something like that. And Russians have their surveillance, they have their forces in nuclear power plant, so it is quite risky to storm the station, because Russia might start some sort of the provocation, saying that it's because of the Ukrainian artillery attack that the reactor buildings are damaged or something like that. For this reason, I don't think that Ukraine will try again to reach the station by force. The only way to return the station safely is to start the counterattack far away from it. The attack absolutely must be successful, cutting all of the supply lines to the station, all of the roads, so Russians will be forced to leave the station or they will be just trapped out there. But in a current reality, this attack is just not possible because Ukraine doesn't have resources. because this is kind of the unreal scenario, at least for this year. I think that Russian Z bloggers are speaking about their own provocation in Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Russians might do something with it even without any sort of the attempts from Ukrainian army to get it under control back. Many of the Russian Z bloggers are affiliated with the Russian Defense Ministry and in general with the Russian propaganda, so they sing the same song as on Russian TV. Just some separate Russian Z bloggers are sometimes saying the real picture, especially when they speak about their huge losses and that situation in Kursk is not going according to the plan. Plus, the Russian occupation administration of Kherson Oblast started to spread the rumors that Ukraine will start the offensive operation, the landing operation, in island of Tantar and Kimbersky Peninsula. Sometimes it's the island too. According to Saldo, the so-called governor of Kherson Oblast, the Ukrainian armed forces gathered a large group of helicopters, assault boats, and basically infantry to start this operation. Well, if we listen to what Russians are saying in their official statements and in their channels, well, it seems like Ukraine is one of the largest armies out there. It concentrated the forces there, here, it goes to Kursk, Ukraine is everywhere, oh, I forgot, with Polish mercenaries and also French legionnaires. That's what Russian officials report about Kursk, that they fight against Polish and French soldiers. Well, honestly saying, there are some of the foreign mercenaries in Kursk, for example, the Georgian Legion. They're even sharing the photo from Sucha, but this photo on the left is with the Russian soldiers in Georgia in 2008. Unfortunately, now Georgia has the pro-Russian government. After the war with Russia, having the pro-Russian government, which only depends on one rich man who has the close ties with Russia, well, it's bad. But nevertheless, volunteers from Georgia continue to fight for Ukraine, even though Georgia officially said that they are not allowed to do so and they will be followed by persecution if they return back to their country. But still, there are many more Ukrainians compared to the expats fighting in the Ukrainian army. By the way, exactly 1 year ago, the command of the Wagner group was captured by Putin's regime. It is so obvious that the Russian FSB was involved that every expert says about it. Russians didn't even start the international investigation, and the internal investigation is calm about the case even after 1 year. Basically, the airplane was shot down in the skies, or there was some sort of the device inside which captured the airplane mid-air. Prigozhin, this bastard could have changed the history of Russia, but he showed weakness. That's what happens if you are weak, and that is what will happen to Putin. It is just a matter of time. Meanwhile, Russia sent some of the rubber to the front lines. What do you think they do with this rubber? Well, they construct the new modification of the hangar tanks, rubber hangar tanks. The main purpose of it is to reduce the weight of the construction, because during the autumn and winter campaign it would be impossible to move around with the heavy hangar tanks. Rubber weighs much less compared to the metal, so it could be a solution for the Russian army. Alright, there was the coup in one of the Russian prison facilities. It's called IK-19. It is located in Volgograd Oblast. Several of the Islamist fanatics stopped the guard of the prison. They were saying that they're working for the known organization with the black flag, ISIS. Yeah, I'm saying that just for YouTube. And mainly it was the response on the behavior of the Russian FSB, of what they've done to the attackers on the Krakow City Hall. Probably you know that story already, so I don't have to tell the precise details. By the way, I think that the most part of the Russian population has already forgotten the events in Krakow City. So those prisoners, fanatics, they had access to the knives. Actually, guard itself sold the knives towards them. We know the price for the knife, 3,000 rubles each. It's around 30 bags, so those prisoners stabbed the guard with the knives they sold to them. Crazy! And this guy, as you see, has some sort of the device in the vest on the top. But by the time the Russian Spetsnaz forces started storming the facility, this jacket didn't work. The Russian soldiers didn't want to capture those fanatics, they just zeroed them. Everyone. It is their standard usual practice. The same story, by the way, happened in Rostov-on-Don 2 months ago, again with fanatic prisoners. But you know what? By eliminating those guys, they are not solving the issue. They make it worse. And there will be more and more of those cases in Russia. There are already many of those fanatics in the Russian Federation. I'm not speaking about normal Muslim community, no. But more immigrants are coming into Russia, and actually Russia lowered the restrictions for immigrants immigrants. Now they don't need to know the Russian language to pass the exam for it to obtain the long-term residence permit in Russia. Russia is doing it because their population is declining, especially with the recent war. They need the replacement of the Russian nationals because they die in Ukraine. So to keep the economy, they opened the borders. Really opened, and it's not just the term which MAGA community uses to describe the poor border control, for example, in Texas. No, in Russia, there is no border. Everyone is okay to go there, especially from the ex-Soviet republics. Around half of the Tajik population is now living in Russia, not in Tajikistan. So Russia keeps its economy, changing its population, but at the same time it's very hard to control every individual. And some people who are brainwashed by fanatic propaganda, who grow up in Aul, so in a small village, they see bright Moscow and how people live there, and they just start to commit the crimes, backing it up with their religious beliefs, which is obvious nonsense, but those are the fanatics. So in no any way I support those people, guys. I want you to understand. And on the other hand, I do not support Russia and its forces. So why the situation is happening in Russia? Well, Putin did it, and his circle, obviously. With their stupid ambitions in Ukraine, they created this situation. They destabilized Russia itself. That's why the war in Ukraine is actually bringing the end of Russia. It will happen in the nearby future after some years. But this process has already been started 2.5 years ago. I know whom Russia should have sent to eliminate those fanatics in the prison. Adam Kadyrov, the son of Ramzan Kadyrov. Here you can see he is able to hold the Russian machine guns, 2 golden machine guns. You may see the rare image of the greatest ever athletics physique. He's not just able to hold 2 of those golden guns, but he is holding his belly. And look at this move. Is there something from the Russian ballet? Well, it is much better. So to get into TikTok battalion, you have to perform the best. By shooting from 2 big golden machine guns, Adam Kadyrov passed the test. Yeah, guys, what we see honestly is just a pure cringe to watch in the 21st century. Yes, that only happens if the stupid people get ultimate power in the country, in this case, region of Russia, Chechnya, but definitely Kadyrov has the ultimate, almost ultimate power there. If you look at the countries with open dictator regimes, like for example North Korea, Tatarstan, part of Russia, Chechnya, you'll see that leaders or dictators behave like the clowns. Why it happens? Well, mainly because no one tells them that it looks cringy. I'm not there shooting golden machine guns by the time the Ukrainian forces are taking Kursk, but even for me it's kind of painful to watch. I believe for the Russian Z community as well. Right, about the ferry in the Caucasus port of the Kerch Strait. Here you see the result of the yesterday's strike, so the ferry is totally kaputted. Altogether with 30 of the tanks full of the diesel fuel. You may say that 4 of the tanks left out there, but guys, come on, under this huge temperature, that diesel is absolutely no-go if it is left in the tanks. The other tanks just melted or went into the water. And the port itself is unserviceable right now, so Ukraine cuts the Russian logistics. And let's check out the updates on Ukrainian front line. So it was yesterday and it is today. Russia just moved a little for the last 24 hours. The pace slowed down from what I see for the 2 consecutive days. Why? Well, mainly because Russia faced the defense line of Ukraine, which Ukraine built before. Maybe Russia will penetrate it in the nearby future, we'll see. In Kursk direction, there was no movement for today. So no big news from the Ukrainian front lines. But anyways, my friends, I'm gonna keep you updated about situation in Ukraine and also this time in Russia, especially in the Kursk Oblast. For now, don't forget to press your huge like to this video. By doing so, you help me a lot. I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are and have a great time.